So I guess the first place you want to start would be the fact that it's actually decentralized. And I think I've talked about this a few times now. When you look at DEXs, they are mostly in the core of a DEX. It should be on chain. But when it comes to the entire ecosystem, there's oftentimes a place where it isn't actually decentralized. So, for example, you have the blockchain layer, right, of the DEX. So we'll just call this DEX, right? And so then the DEX is connected using a user interface, right? And it's important that all of this is actually decentralized, because what often happens is that you have a user interface that isn't decentralized, and then you have a DEX which is on chain that is decentralized sometimes. But in terms of features, you got to make sure that it is actually decentralized. But when it comes to trading, right now, I would say that the most important feature to have is at least to have spot trading, which is probably one of the most pure forms of trading there is right now, versus leverage trading, which, as we know, is very popular, but it's also what causes everybody to get wrecked all the time. There's big gains, but there's also big losses. So I would say that in terms of features, you want to ensure that the entire ecosystem is actually decentralized. And usually, when it comes to the UI, that's where a lot of these projects just fail. They aren't actually decentralized. And what could happen is that when it comes to what the user is seeing compared to what's on the DEX can be different. And when the orders get fulfilled, then you end up with something that's slightly off, if not possibly manipulated. So having the UI and having the DEX be something that is also decentralized, you want to have the UI decentralized as well. Decentralized. We'll just call it decentralized. Then you're able to gain more surety in terms of the transactions that are taking place, and everybody is able to access it equally. Right now, when it comes to the UIs, in most cases, there's limitations. So if you're going to a UI for a DEX and you're signing some kind of a terms and conditions anywhere, it's not a DEX. So you want to make sure that that's not the case. But if it's something where it's just a tool of like a graphical interface that anybody can access, then, and there's not any kind of terms or conditions that are attached to it, then you know you got something that's open and fair. It's a different kind of an approach, but the DEX in Peerplays takes much more of a liking to how most people are used to trades, and understanding an order book where there's an order placed on one side, an order placed on another side, and if there is a match, then that is when there's actually a trade that takes place, right? So that's when they will actually have an exchange and the value is transferred. So it's just two different ways to approach it. And there's other things that are going to go into this in terms of future protocols that we're working on in Peerplays that are going to allow for this to become very liquid in terms of like having the order book be very tight to every asset that exists in the Peerplays network. So what happens now is the consensus in Peerplays is made up of, it includes advisors or a type of a committee, right? And so the committee is elected by the consensus of the PPY holders. And what will happen is that a number of them would be elected. And what they can do is they are then elected specifically to be able to create proposals which can change the fee structure within the blockchain. So that reason for that is so that they can respond to the market needs of the blockchain itself. So if the advisors decide, okay, the price of an order, like if you're the fee for an order will be something like 0.001 PPY, for example, right? And if that happens to be worth, say, 5 cents at the time that they do that, what they can do is they can actually make a proposal to the blockchain, right? And when the proposal is put into the chain, all of the advisors have to vote on it. And if there's a consensus among them all, then that fee goes into effect within the next hour. So it happens very quickly, and it can allow for the chain to be very agile in terms of responding to market fees. Now, the slow part of this, of course, is that it's done by people, advisors, and these are elected by the voters in order to ensure that it's being kept up. Generally speaking, the changes to these fee structures don't happen very often. From my experience, it happens maybe once every quarter to 6 months at most. And it's really just to ensure that if the price of PPY was to get very high, then or very low, then the fees are matching closely in order to counter the supply. So it's a anti-inflationary measure, and of course the cost of being able to trade on Peerplays is basically pennies, and it's not like it is in Ethereum where I went to do a transaction today, as a matter of fact, and it was going to cost me $150 in ETH to do it. So I didn't do it. But yeah, so the advisors are the ones that would do that. That is the way the chain works today. There is work being done in order to update the protocols so that this will all become something that's more automated. That's part of the proof of pulse consensus, so that we don't have an advisor group that's doing this. Instead, it's going to be handled throughout the entire chain in every PPY holder. How do I think blockchain improves the world we're living in right now? So we're living in a world right now where you don't have a lot of accountability for the things that are going on with authority. Any kind of authority you think about right now, whether it be corporations, whether it be governments, any kind of entity where there's supposed to be accountability or transparency has broken down. And we are in some places in the world in a state of lawlessness where there should be governance. And when you don't have systems of accountability, when you don't have systems that allow for transparency, then you end up with situations like this where you have a world that's basically not trusting anything at this stage. There's not a lot of things with what's going on that a lot of people have a lot of faith in now. And so you have this crumbling of institutions, and it's because they're antiquated, and there's a lot of backdoor deals going on. So when you have that kind of an environment and you introduce a blockchain to it, you change the game. You actually change the system, and you introduce a system where accountability becomes the norm, and where transparency is the standard. And if you have that kind of governance in place in the world, and the way that can change it is tremendous. Now, what's happened, for example, with Bitcoin in being introduced to the world, that has introduced transparency and monetary value, right? Instead of us wondering how much quantitative easing the government's going to dole out with free printed money, we know there will always be 21 million Bitcoin, and that the value against that to everybody who's using it in the world is going to likely increase, but we know there's only 21 million Bitcoin. We don't have to worry about the possibility of somebody manipulating that. And we know that in terms of monetary policy, that's gone awry. Like, I think it's something like 80% of all US dollars were printed in the last year. So these kind of systems, in terms of what blockchain offers, is a way for people to actually have a consensus with the system that they can actually put their trust in. And it's interesting because we're actually trusting a protocol versus trusting people. And these are for things that, generally speaking, you don't want to have people empowered with, because at the end of the day, with that kind of control, it ends up creating a kind of situation where you have a master-slave sort of class. And we've seen that happen where there's the whole thing of wealth now accumulated in a single 1% in the world. And that's because they have control of the money supply. So the world changes significantly when you introduce blockchain technology to it. And everywhere around the world, you see countries now adopting Bitcoin, again, using blockchain tech, to be able to get away from the corruption that surrounds their monetary systems. basically these systems are crumbling around us, and it's coming to game over for fiat currencies. And now we're getting into another stage, and there's an opportunity to be able to move to these new open protocols that are rules without rulers, and allows for differing groups and countries and companies to be able to have uh, uh, a settlement layer, per se, that isn't going to be in the control of any one entities, and being, of course, moved towards their interests. That's what happens historically. That's what we've seen happen up until today, and it's coming to an end. And so now they're looking at introducing new systems. When it comes to blockchain technology, it doesn't have any morals or ethics. Instead, it's just a protocol, and it's how you apply it. There's two things happening in the world now. Today, we're seeing some governments looking to introduce CBDCs, which are controlled systems where they will have even more control over how their money is printed. And then there is Bitcoin, which is an open and free network, which allows for freedom of anybody to be able to transact. In a CBDC network where governments have created it, you have social credit systems, which are going to make it so that they can manipulate your behavior and decide what kind of ways you're going to vote, or what kind of ways you're going to live based on that. And then meanwhile, you have something like Bitcoin, which is just an open layer that allows for anybody to transact, and there's nobody that's going to be able to take it away from you. So two different kinds of systems emerging. Which one's going to win? I think both will exist, but at the end of the day, I would rather be on the side of freedom. So, Peerplays in the blockchain ecosystem is meant to humanize crypto. And when we talk about that, that's something which is pretty much missing from every single crypto project that exists right now. It's generally really more focused on a kind of left brain sort of approach, where everything is all about the math or about the crypto mechanics. Very, like I said, very logical in terms of their approach. Meanwhile, there's the right side brain, which is the creative, more emotionally intelligent side of how we think. And trend-wise, the world is moving more to a more holistic kind of approach. You could say, like, instead of left and right brain, it's more of a whole mind type of approach to how they want to live. People are now not just wanting for things; they're now wanting meaning. And so, what we're doing with Peerplays is we're creating an ecosystem where we are going to be connecting with all the other blockchains that are in the ecosystem, so that we can provide a sort of emotionally intelligent layer, you might say. You could call it us really focusing on the human equation when it comes to working with blockchains. Because when people think about blockchains, they really focus on the tech. But part of the tech includes creating consensus, right, amongst people. And the people part is the part that is often neglected, or it is replicated based on what we know in centralized systems. In Peerplays, what we're doing is we're focusing on the human equation part of things, and being able to give people a choice on working with the existing systems that are out there, or being able to have a consensus which is based on a more human approach, meaning that we make it much more connected to the way people work, rather than being mechanical in terms of the approach. The biggest challenges right now with Peerplays has to do with essentially building out the network infrastructure that supports Peerplays. So for the past few years, we've been in more of a development phase. And so with that, as the chain's been operating, there hasn't been a lot of activity. But right now, there's the opportunity to introduce the DEX. And with that, we need to have more witnesses. And so anybody can become a witness in the Peerplays blockchain. It's open and decentralized, right? You just need to have the voting support of the PPY token holders. And then there's also becoming a Suns node, right? And so with the Suns node, that's what actually connects to other blockchains. So we have support for Bitcoin and we have support for Hive, right? So there's Hive and there's also Hive-backed dollars. Becoming a witness allows you to be able to be a block signer essentially in the blockchain. And that allows you to be able to help with ensuring that the chain's moving. Becoming a Suns node, like I said, that enables you to actually sign transactions connected to transfers that handle Bitcoin or handling Hive and Hive-backed dollars. And again, you would also earn PPY from these activities. These are very important to the network. Right now, we want to make it more robust. So we are definitely encouraging people to become Suns and Witness node operators in the network. Those that do become they become more proficient in understanding how Peerplays works, and they become a little bit of superstars in terms of the community, right? So people who are witnesses and Suns operators are in high regard to the token holders, and they want to be able to support them any way they can. So the main thing that Peerplays is focused on right now is looking at how we can get more witnesses and Suns to increase the decentralization and make it so that the network is actually anti-fragile. And that will continue in the short term. And then following that, of course, we're continuing to upgrade our protocols that are going to enable more than just these kinds of consensus. So there's going to be other elements that are going to be more modular in the Peerplays network and allow for different kinds of operations to happen in the network. And there'll be more on that in the future. Right now, though, it's being a witness or Suns operator node.